Hey everyone, Cephalopod. I've got the patch 4.4 notes in front of me. I'm going to do a rundown of the changes and their implications for competitive, as well as my expectation for the metagame afterwards. Let's get into it. First, 3 buffs for the Nightfall archetype. We've got Cygnus the Moonstalker. This one is going to probably remain irrelevant. I don't see Cygnus really being a finisher for the deck. A 3/3 stat line for 5 mana is really bad. The effect is not worth 5 mana either. The card, I don't know. I feel like it's not going to make the cut. However, Clothesman Way is a complete opposite story. This card is probably going to go in like every single Targon deck. It's exactly what the region needs. And honestly, like whether or not Nightfall becomes meta, Cloven Way is going to be a great card. Moondreamer, this one's totally placebo buff. The buff is completely irrelevant, but I think we will see Moondreamer crop up in decks because, you know, the nature of a placebo buff, people will realize the card actually is pretty good already. It just gives you reason to play it. Another Targon buff comes through, and it's the Targon Tellstones getting completely revamped. 2 of the cards change. We get Hush and Behold the Infinite added to the card, and suddenly it is looking really appealing for a variety of Targon decks to include Tellstones. Honestly, multiple copies. Hush is a card that you really want access to, but it's hard to devote deck slots to, so it's really nice to be able to include Tellstones and have access to Hush. 3 buffs for Ascended come through. Azir is a little easier to level, Nasus is a little easier to level, and Glory's Call is a bit easier to cast. The Nasus buff is great for SI, but honestly in a meta where Targonian Tellstones is probably going to be everywhere, and probably there's going to be a lot of recalls as well, it's hard to imagine Nasus cropping up as a threat. Azir also doesn't really have a home at the moment. Like, none of his decks are super great, so 1 extra progress is probably not going to matter. And Glory's Call is like, I've literally never seen this card cast. I don't think people are going to start playing Ascended because the Glory's Call is 1 less mana. Another placebo buff comes through, and this time it's to the Soul Harvest, which was already probably the best removal spell in the game. But people were only running it as like 1x, 2x here and there. Now people are finally going to realize, hey, this card's really broken. And I think Shadow Isles is going to have a bit of a resurgence after people realize this card's really not balanced. Additionally, Kadrigan the Infernal +4/+4. I don't think this buff is really going to matter for the Dragon archetype. I looked at this deck, and the ways you would cheat Kadrigan out are Eclipse Dragon, -1 cost maybe, but you would just rather have Aesol, and I think Kadrigan is this type of buff is not going to matter so much for the Dragon archetype, and I think also it's going to be a bit of an unfavorable metagame for dragons. Priestess of Zedderlight, even more irrelevant. Like, this is, I don't know why they even added this to the patch notes. Ashnox gets a hit. The Ash level up, which honestly was pretty much a non-factor in basically every game, gets a bit nerfed. That's pretty irrelevant, but what is relevant is a Reckoning going to 7 mana. This is an uncuttable 3x from the deck, and I think people are going to underestimate how much this really is going to hurt Ashnox as an archetype. Ashnox did get a quality of life buff with the mirror image though. This is just called kind of quality of life, not going to matter much for the power level of the deck. Vandal Gunner's got totally reworked. It's now 10 mana, it's a 5/5, and it gets reduced cost for every multi-region you summon, and you don't need four regions to get the 3 impact stacks. I think people are maybe overreacting to how easy it is to get 10 multi-region. I think that's going to be pretty hard to do. But Tristana, I think, is already super strong, and this is a card that you're absolutely going to play in the deck. Speaking of a deck that's already strong and getting a great card added to it, Advanced Intel, holy moly. Like, I'm speechless. This card's incredible, and it is exactly what Puffcaps need. They run Peddler, and they run, they're both called Peddler. They're spell-based archetype. They're going to put Peddler down on 2, Peddler down on 3, and they're going to start spamming spells on 4, spamming spells on turn 5, and then they're going to blow you up on 6 and 7. This is exactly what the deck needs, and it's going to be immediately a 3x. Deathless Knight, I have looked into the combos. I spent like hours building deck lists for Deathless Knight, and I did not find anything. So maybe there's someone out there smarter than me that can figure it out, but a lot of the synergy cards have been rotated, and I'm not seeing anything. Retired Reckoner, I don't know, like, I've never seen this card cast. I don't know why they added this to the patch notes. And here's the Samira nerfs for the patch. All Out getting hit, but for +2/+1, this was pretty expected. The card is going to be still okay, but Samira herself is going to take a lot of damage because you're seeing these games where she would go to 5/5, she'd go to 7/7, and just be completely unkillable, but now Samira, you might actually have a chance of killing her. Samira herself didn't get touched this patch, but a lot of her support cards, specifically for the Fizz deck, did. So I think we'll see the Fizz deck fall out of popularity a little bit, and we'll see the Varus deck really continue to shine. Wiggly Brittle Fish and Inferno are, part of that Fizz deck. Burblefish had a couple of other use cases, but mostly it was a Samira card, and it's going to be a while before we see either of those cards shine again. Leona also took a lot of damage this patch. She was really dominating and had been for a long time, but slowing down the deck when it comes to Leona stuns. The Sun Guardian isn't really able to attack until it's like really 5 health, 6 health, so you might actually get, between these two changes, you might actually get like 8 effective HP if you're playing against it in certain cases. So this matters a lot for the Leona deck, and I think it's going to knock it down, maybe out of it being S tier and into like not even really tournament ready. Karma got a placebo nerf. I mean, this one doesn't really matter. You're only really going to see Karma on turn 10 with coins. Like it doesn't really have any effect. Caustic Riff actually will hurt the BB deck a little bit, and it will hurt PZ Karma as well. You do actually have to activate Flow for it to be castable. I think BB decks, Mischievous Mirai, are not going to really activate the Flow very often, and I think they're going to feel this nerf a lot. And something like Drum Solo, I think you're never going to see Drum Solo again. Like, PZ has better draw options, and Formula is just a way better card. Like, you're never going to see Drum Solo cast again. Opulent Foyer, like, Gwen and Quinn are still really good with Opulent Foyer for all the same reasons. They're just not getting like Relentless Pursuit 3x in the deck list probably. Ambitious Cultist is the only nerfed Varus Samira that we see in the patch, and I think this is going to be a decently relevant nerf because it is a card that you're going to keep in most matchups, and it's going to matter, but probably not enough to knock the deck down out of the meta entirely. You're just going to see it maybe brought down to a beatable power level. Prank got completely reworked this patch, but this doesn't really impact the power level of Prank. It just kind of equalizes the choices a little bit, so it seems like it's prep work for future Prank cards. And here's my tier list of how I expect the meta to play out. Each deck list is represented by a single champion icon. A tier, we see the Karma deck that currently exists, Samira Varus that currently exists. You can probably run those deck lists as they are currently and do great. Jarvan, you're seeing Jarvan Alawi, you're seeing Jarvan Shen. I think Jarvan is in a great spot. You could even see Jarvan Garen. Jarvan is in a great spot to succeed. Heimer Jace, amazing. Aatrox, untouched. Alawi, this can be the Swain, this can be the Jarvan. Great cards. Teemo, I think, is going to make an entrance into the meta with this new Flash Bomb card. It is like, you could not have designed a better card to add to the deck. Rise, still good. Deep, still good, getting better every patch. They got Soul Harvest buffed. I think Deep players are finally going to realize that Soul Harvest should be a 3x in their deck, and now that it's buffed, I think they're going to finally be mind controlled into putting it in there. Ashe got hurt, but not that much. Going to probably drop down to A- tier. Nora Broadbane, I think, is going to be pretty decent at killing these Varus decks and killing these Jarvan decks, so it'll probably be able to be an A tier. Malphite Talia just seems to never really go away. Like, it doesn't really get any nerfs or buffs, and it kind of hangs around this like fringe meta relevance, and I think it's going to continue to stay there. Jack represents BB. It's something that, like, if you really have a specific reason for playing it, I think you can, and if you don't, you shouldn't. B tier, I think Tristana, the buff to her archetype is not that relevant to bring her like really properly into the metagame. She'll probably be seen a little bit on the fringe. Leona got knocked way hard. These nerfs are pretty bad for Leona. Like honest to God, the deck might actually follow the meta entirely. Garen represents ICHIRAN pile, which I can put on screen if you're unfamiliar, but I think the deck is probably around the same strength as Leona, to be honest. Echo for Echo Jinx doesn't really have any reason to break into the metagame in a major way, as far as I can see. Veigar, like Darkness, either with Nora or with Senna or with both, is probably going to be, some kind of SI control. I think this is going to be one of the weaker versions of SI control, especially compared to Heimerdinger. But we'll see. And Nasus, even though he got buffed, he might enter the meta, but honestly, that's pretty optimistic. I think he's probably going to be still pretty weak. Dragons, Diana, down in don't tier. Even though they got buffed, I think the buffs were not very major, and they're going to remain weak. And of course, Lurk. I usually put in don't tier, but this time I made a special Lurk tier for Lurk. So there's patch 4.4 and my predictions.